The great spaceport of Velara Prime was alive with noise and movement. Ships from across the galaxy floated in the sky like silver birds, coming and going, while strange creatures walked through the glass walkways. Some had glowing eyes, others had smooth blue skin, and a few even hovered above the ground. It was a place where many worlds met. But today, something very different was about to happen. Commander Renara, one of the most respected leaders of the Velari Empire, walked down the platform with her usual grace. She was tall and elegant, her deep violet eyes scanning the busy port. Her long silver hair flowed behind her like a shining river, and her armored suit marked her as someone important. Today, Renara was here to oversee a meeting with traders from the distant Orion colonies. She had been through many such meetings, and nothing surprised her anymore. Or so she thought. As she walked past the docking bays, her sharp eyes caught sight of something that made her stop in her tracks. There, standing near a small, strange-looking ship, was a being she had never seen before. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with tanned skin and short, dark hair. His eyes were a deep shade of brown, filled with curiosity as he looked around the spaceport. He wore a simple jacket, dark pants, and a belt with tools that looked old but well used. But it was not his clothes that made Renara freeze. It was the fact that he was human. Renara's mind spun with shock. Humans were supposed to be gone. Nothing more than stories from ancient history. They had fought a great war long ago and disappeared from the galaxy. No one had seen a human in over 1,000 years. And yet, here one stood, right in front of her. The human noticed her staring and smiled, as if he knew her. His smile was warm but also mysterious, like he carried secrets. For a moment, Renara didn't know what to do. Her hands felt cold, and her heart beat faster than it had in years. Who was this man? And why had he come to Velara Prime? Before she could move, her assistant, a young Velari soldier named Tolan, stepped closer to her side. "Commander, is something wrong?" Tolan asked, following her gaze. When his eyes found the human, he gasped. "Is that human?" Renara whispered, her voice low. "It can't be." But it was. She quickly signaled her guards. "Surround him. Bring him to me." Carefully. The guards moved fast, surrounding the human, who raised his hands calmly, as if he had expected this. "I'm not here to cause trouble," the man said, his voice smooth but firm. "My name is Captain Elias Ward, and I come from Earth." "Earth?" Renara repeated, stepping forward. "Earth is a dead world." Elias smiled again, but this time there was sadness in his eyes. "Not as dead as you think." Renara studied him carefully. His face was serious, but his body language showed no fear. He seemed to be waiting for something, or perhaps for someone. "Take him to the high chamber," Renara ordered. "I want to know who he is and how he got here." As her guards led Elias away, Renara followed, her mind racing. If humans had survived, everything the Velari knew about the galaxy was about to change. She glanced once more at Elias as he walked calmly with the guards. Why did he look at her like that? Like they had met before? Renara shook her head, trying to clear her thoughts. She had to stay sharp. If this man was truly human, he could be a danger. Or perhaps he carried an even greater secret, one that could affect the whole galaxy. As they walked into the glowing halls of the Velari capital, Renara knew one thing for sure. Her world had just changed forever. And this human man was at the center of it all. The high chamber of Velara Prime was a beautiful and powerful place. Tall crystal walls reflected the sunlight, filling the room with soft blue and silver light. From here, the Velari leaders made decisions that affected the entire galaxy. Commander Renara stood by the large window, her hands behind her back, staring out at the busy sky filled with flying ships. But her mind was not on the view. Behind her, sitting calmly on a silver chair, was Captain Elias Ward, the human man who had appeared from nowhere. He watched her carefully, as if trying to guess what she was thinking. "So," Renara said finally, turning to face him, "you say you are from Earth. But Earth is gone. It was destroyed in the Great War. Elias leaned forward slightly, resting his arms on his knees. That's what everyone was told, he said softly. But what if Earth was never destroyed? What if we went into hiding to survive? Rhaenyra's eyes narrowed. Why should I believe you? Elias gave a small smile, but it was not a happy one. Because I'm standing right here, a living human. Isn't that proof enough? Rhaenyra walked closer, her long silver hair moving like silk behind her. If humans are alive, where have you been all this time? And why come here now? Elias looked into her eyes, his expression serious. Because something is coming, something dangerous, and you're not ready for it. Before Rhaenyra could ask what he meant, the door opened and Chancellor Velker, one of the oldest and most powerful Velarii, entered the room. His sharp eyes went straight to Elias, and his lips pressed into a thin line. So it's true, Velker said coldly, a human, here on Velara Prime. Rhaenyra stepped back and bowed slightly. Chancellor, this is Captain Elias Ward. He claims that humans survived. Velker stared at Elias for a long moment. Survived. After all these centuries. Impossible. Elias stood up calmly. I know it's hard to believe, Chancellor, but I'm here because you need to hear the truth. Velker crossed his arms. What truth? Elias took a deep breath. There is a danger returning to this galaxy. The Krexar. Machines built for war, with no heart, no mercy. Long ago, they destroyed human worlds. And now, they're coming back. The room fell silent. Rhaenyra felt a cold chill run down her spine. The Krexar were just a legend, or so she thought. Velker shook his head. The Krexar are myths, stories to scare children. Elias looked at him firmly. No, they are real, and they are coming. I've seen them. Rhaenyra's voice was calm but sharp. If this is true, why come to us? Why not fight them yourself? Elias looked at her with tired eyes. Because humans can't fight them alone. Our numbers are few. We need allies. We need you. Velker laughed, but there was no humor in his voice. Allies? After the war humans started, you expect us to trust you. Elias didn't look angry. Instead, he nodded slowly. I understand why you don't trust me. But if we don't work together, none of us will survive. Rhaenyra watched him closely. She could see that Elias was speaking from his heart. He believed every word. But how could she trust him? Velker turned to Rhaenyra. Commander, I want this human locked up until we learn the truth. He could be a spy or worse. Rhaenyra hesitated. Part of her agreed with the Chancellor. But another part, deep inside, whispered that Elias was telling the truth. Before she could answer, Elias spoke again. If you lock me up, you'll lose your only chance to prepare. The Krexar are coming fast. You need to decide. Now. Rhaenyra looked into his eyes and saw something there that surprised her. Fear, but also hope. She took a deep breath. Chancellor, allow me to speak with him more. If he speaks lies, we will know. But if he speaks the truth, we must be ready. Velker looked at her for a long moment, then nodded sharply. You have 1 day, Commander. After that, I expect answers. With that, Velker turned and left the room. As the door closed, Rhaenyra faced Elias again. You have 1 day to convince me. Start talking. Elias gave a small smile. Thank you, Commander. I won't waste it. As Rhaenyra sat across from him, she knew her life had suddenly become much more complicated. If Elias was right, everything she knew about the galaxy was about to change. Forever. Commander Rhaenyra sat quietly in the high chamber, staring at Captain Elias Ward across the table. His calm face showed no fear, but Rhaenyra could see a shadow in his eyes, as if he carried heavy memories. All right, Captain, Rhaenyra said, her voice firm. You have 1 day to explain everything. If you speak lies, you will not leave this place. Elias nodded. I understand. but what I'm about to tell you may sound impossible. Rhaenyra leaned forward. Then make me believe it. Elias took a deep breath before he began. 1,000 years ago, humans were strong, he said. Our world stretched across many stars. But we also had many enemies, including the Velarii. Rhaenyra frowned. The Velarii and humans fought a terrible war. Everyone knows that. Elias shook his head. That's only part of the story. He stood up and walked slowly to the window, looking out at the bright skies of Velara Prime. The war started because humans found something powerful, a technology left behind by an ancient race. It was not meant for war, but others feared it. The Velarii feared it most of all. Rhaenyra raised an eyebrow. What kind of technology? Elias turned to face her. A weapon that could stop the Krexar. A weapon to save the galaxy from them. Rhaenyra's eyes widened. The Krexar. You still speak of them as real. They are real, Elias said firmly. Back then, the Krexar were destroying worlds. Humans fought them, but we were losing. That's why we needed the ancient weapon. But before we could use it, the Velarii attacked, thinking we wanted to control the galaxy. Rhaenyra's mind was racing. She had always been taught that humans started the war because they wanted power. But now Elias was saying they wanted to save everyone. If what you say is true, Rhaenyra asked carefully, why did humans disappear? Elias looked sad. Because we couldn't fight two enemies at once, the Krexar and the Velarii. So we made a choice. We destroy our own cities to make it look like we were gone. We went into hiding, deep in space, far beyond the maps of this galaxy. Rhaenyra felt cold. You mean, humans are still alive out there? Elias nodded. Yes. We watched from the shadows, waiting to see if the Krexar would return. Now they are waking up again. And soon, they will attack. Silence filled the room. Rhaenyra stood and walked to the window, thinking hard. If what you say is true, she said quietly, why would the Velarii leaders hide this from us? Why cover up the truth? Elias gave a small, sad smile. Because no leader wants to admit they made a mistake. If the Velarii had worked with humans back then, maybe we could have stopped the Krexar forever. But now, because of fear and pride, the danger is back. Rhaenyra turned to him, her eyes sharp. And what do you want from us now? Elias looked serious. I want to warn you. I want to help you fight the Krexar, but we can't do it alone. We need the Velarii. You have strong fleets and brave soldiers. If we work together, we have a chance. Rhaenyra crossed her arms, thinking. She had always believed the humans were dangerous. But now, if Elias was telling the truth, they might be the only hope to stop the Krexar. Still, there were many questions in her mind. Suddenly, there was a soft sound at the door. Tolan, her young assistant, entered. He looked nervous. Commander, Tolan said quietly, the Chancellor wishes to speak with you privately. Rhaenyra nodded. Tell him I will come soon. Tolan hesitated. Commander, there is more. We received a message from one of our outposts near the edge of the galaxy. Something strange. A fleet of unknown ships has been seen. Large ships, cold and dark, like machines. Rhaenyra's heart skipped a beat. Machines, she whispered. Elias stood up quickly. The Krexar, he said. They're already here. Rhaenyra turned to Tolan. Prepare my ship. I want to see that outpost myself. Yes, Commander, Tolan said, bowing before hurrying away. Rhaenyra looked at Elias, her mind made up. You're coming with me. If these are the Krexar, I want to see them with my own eyes. Elias nodded. I was hoping you'd say that. As they left the chamber together, Rhaenyra felt a strange mix of fear and determination. For the first time in her life, she didn't know what would happen next. But one thing was certain. The galaxy was no longer safe. And now she had to decide if she would trust this human, the man who might be their last hope. The silver starship flew smoothly through space, leaving behind the glowing towers of Velara Prime. Commander Rhaenyra stood at the front window of the ship, her sharp violet eyes watching the stars speed past. Beside her stood Captain Elias Ward, his face calm but serious. Neither of them spoke for a while. The silence was heavy, filled with unspoken thoughts. Rhaenyra broke the silence first. "If what you say is true, Captain, then we may already be too late." Elias looked at her carefully. "We still have time, Commander, but not much. The Krexar move fast when they are awake. If they have reached this part of space, they will soon strike." Rhaenyra crossed her arms, thinking deeply. Why now? Why return after so long? Elias shook his head. "I don't know. Maybe they finished destroying other galaxies. Maybe they were waiting for us to forget about them. But I do know this. They won't stop until everything is gone." A soft sound broke their conversation. It was Tolan, Rhaenyra's loyal assistant. "Commander, we are approaching the outpost," he said. Rhaenyra turned to him. "Prepare for landing, and alert the soldiers. I want everyone ready." "Yes, Commander," Tolan said quickly and left. Elias watched her with a thoughtful look. "You care about your people," he said quietly. Rhaenyra gave him a sharp glance. "Of course. I am their commander. It's my duty to protect them." Elias nodded slowly. "That's good. You'll need that strength soon." Moments later, the ship landed gently on the outpost's docking platform. The place looked quiet. Too quiet. Normally, workers and guards would be moving around, but now, there was no one in sight. Rhaenyra frowned. Something is wrong. She walked down the ramp with Elias beside her, followed by a group of armed Velarri soldiers. The wind was cold, and the sky above the outpost was dark with heavy clouds. "Stay alert," Rhaenyra ordered. As they moved deeper into the outpost, they saw signs of a struggle. Broken machines, doors forced open, and strange burn marks on the walls. "What happened here?" Tolan whispered. Elias bent down to look at one of the burn marks. His face grew pale. "Krexar weapons did this." Rhaenyra looked around sharply. "But where are the people? There should be over 200 workers here." Suddenly, a soft noise echoed through the empty hallway. A metallic clicking sound, like sharp claws tapping the floor. Everyone froze. From the shadows, a small Krexar scout machine rolled into view. It looked like a spider made of black metal, with glowing red eyes. The soldiers raised their weapons. "Wait," Elias said quickly. "Don't shoot yet." The machine paused, turning its head toward them. Then, in a flash, it moved fast, too fast, and leaped toward them. "Fire!" Rhaenyra shouted. The Velarri soldiers opened fire, their energy blasts hitting the machine. After a few hits, it fell to the ground, broken and sparking. But Rhaenyra was already worried. "If that was just a scout," she said, "then more are close." Elias nodded. "They always send scouts first. The real attack comes soon after." As if to answer him, alarms suddenly began to ring through the outpost. Red lights flashed along the walls. "Commander," Tolan called out, checking the screen on the wall. "Sensors are picking up large ships approaching fast. They are not Velarri ships." Elias stepped closer to the screen. His face grew serious. "Krexar warships." Rhaenyra's eyes narrowed. "How many?" Tolan looked at her, his face pale. "At least 15, maybe more." Elias looked directly at Rhaenyra. "Now do you believe me?" Rhaenyra took a deep breath. "I believe you." She turned to her soldiers. "Prepare to leave. We need to return to Velara Prime and warn the council. They need to know the Krexar have returned." Elias stepped beside her. "If we go now, we can still prepare, but we must hurry." Rhaenyra nodded. "Let's move." As they ran back to the ship, Rhaenyra glanced once at the sky, where distant black shapes of Krexar ships were beginning to appear. Her heart was heavy. Everything she knew, everything she believed in, was now changed. For the first time in her life, she was afraid, but she was also ready to fight. She looked at Elias. If we are going to survive this, we will need to trust each other. Elias smiled, though his eyes were serious. Agreed, Commander. Together, we have a chance. As the ship lifted off and flew away from the doomed outpost, Rhaenyra knew a new war was beginning. A war not between humans and Velarri, but a war for the future of all life in the galaxy. The starship raced through space, moving fast as silver and blue lights streaked past the windows. Commander Rhaenyra stood on the deck, her hands tightly holding the rail, her mind full of worry. Beside her, Captain Elias Ward watched the stars quietly. He could feel the tension in the air, but he knew there was no time to waste. "We need to reach Velara Prime quickly," Rhaenyra said, her voice sharp. "The Council must hear the truth. If they don't believe us, we'll lose the chance to prepare." Elias nodded. "I agree, but they may not listen. They still see humans as enemies." Rhaenyra looked at him. "Then we must make them listen." Just then, Tolan entered the room, holding a datapad. His face was pale, and he looked nervous. "Commander," he said, "we are receiving more reports. Outposts on the outer rim have gone silent. No messages, no signs of life." Rhaenyra's heart sank. "How many?" Tolan looked down at the datapad. 5, maybe more." Elias stepped forward. "It's begun," he said. "The Krexar are moving fast." Rhaenyra turned to Tolan. "Tell the pilot to go at maximum speed. We need to be at Velara Prime before the Krexar get there." "Yes, Commander," Tolan said, and quickly left. As the ship sped on, Rhaenyra turned to Elias. "If the Council refuses to believe us, what then?" Elias looked at her with serious eyes. "Then we fight without them. Humans are ready. We have weapons the galaxy has never seen, but we cannot win alone. We need the Velarri fleets." Rhaenyra nodded slowly. She had always trusted the Council, but now she was unsure. Finally, after long hours, the shining towers of Velara Prime appeared in the distance. But even from far away, something felt wrong. "There are too many ships around the planet," Rhaenyra said, frowning. "That's a full battle fleet." Elias narrowed his eyes. Maybe they already know something is coming. As their ship approached, a message came through. It was Chancellor Velcor, his face serious on the screen. "Commander Rhaenyra, return at once to the High Chamber. Bring the human with you," Velcor ordered. Rhaenyra gave a sharp nod. "We will arrive soon, Chancellor." The screen went dark. Elias looked at her. "He doesn't sound friendly." Rhaenyra gave a small smile. "He never does." Once they landed, Rhaenyra and Elias were taken quickly to the High Chamber. Velcor stood waiting, along with other council members. All of them looked at Elias with cold eyes. "Well, Commander," Velcor said, "you bring us bad news and a human. Speak." Rhaenyra stood tall. "Chancellor, the Krexar have returned. We saw them with our own eyes at the outpost. They destroyed it. We barely escaped." Velcor shook his head. "Impossible. The Krexar are a myth." "They are real," Elias said firmly. "And they are coming for all of us." The room fell silent. Some council members whispered to each other. Velcor turned to Elias. "And why should we trust you? A human who comes here with wild stories." Elias stepped forward, looking directly at the Chancellor. "Because if you don't believe me, you'll see the truth too late. By then, your cities will burn." The words hung heavy in the air. Rhaenyra added, "Chancellor, I believe him. I saw the Krexar, and our sensors picked up their ships." Velcor frowned but said nothing. Suddenly, another council member, Elder Saren, stood up. He was older, with kind but wise eyes. "Chancellor, if what they say is true, we must act," Saren said. "We cannot take this risk lightly." Velcor looked at Saren, clearly angry. "We do not make decisions based on fear." Elias stepped forward again. Then make them based on facts. You can send scouts to the outpost. See the truth for yourselves." Velcor stared at Elias for a long time. Finally, he turned to Rhaenyra. "You will lead a small fleet to confirm this report," Velcor said. "But if this is a trick, Commander, you will answer for it." Rhaenyra nodded firmly. "Understood, Chancellor." Velcor waved his hand. "Go now. Prepare." As Rhaenyra and Elias left the chamber, Elias whispered, "That's a start." Rhaenyra gave a small smile. Better than nothing. Back at her ship, Rhaenyra gathered her officers. "We are to return to the outpost with a fleet," she told them. "Our mission is to find proof of the Krexer and return safely." Elias looked at her. "We'll find more than proof. We may find a war already started." Rhaenyra nodded. "Then we will be ready." As they prepared to leave, Rhaenyra looked at Elias. "Thank you, Captain. You brought us a warning we didn't want to hear, but needed." Elias gave her a soft smile. "Thank you for listening, Commander. Now let's make sure your people survive." The ship lifted off again, carrying them back into danger. But now, they were no longer divided. They were ready to face the coming storm, together. The fleet of Velarii ships moved through space like glowing arrows. Their silver bodies shined against the darkness, and their engines left trails of blue light behind them. In the lead ship, Commander Rhaenyra stood with Captain Elias Ward, both watching carefully as they neared the ruined outpost. "Almost there," Tolan said, checking his screen. His face was pale, but his voice was steady. Rhaenyra nodded. "Good. Tell all ships to prepare for combat. We don't know what we'll find." "Yes, Commander." Elias looked out at the stars. "They'll be here," he said quietly. Rhaenyra glanced at him. "You sound sure." Elias met her gaze. "Because I've seen how the Krexer fight. They don't attack and run. They stay until everything is gone." Rhaenyra took a deep breath. She had been hoping Elias was wrong, but now she felt the same fear growing in her heart. Suddenly, an alarm rang through the ship. Red lights flashed on every screen. "Commander," Tolan called out, panic in his voice. "Krexer ships, dozens of them, coming in fast." "Shields up," Rhaenyra shouted. "All ships, battle positions." Elias stepped closer to her. "It's starting." Out in space, the black Krexar warships appeared like shadows, moving fast toward the Velarii fleet. Their strange shapes looked like twisted metal and bone, and red energy glowed from deep inside them. "They are charging weapons," Tolan shouted. "Ready our weapons," Rhaenyra ordered. "Fire when in range." As the two fleets neared each other, the space between them suddenly exploded in bright lights. Velarii ships fired blue and white energy beams, while the Krexar fired dark red blasts that tore through space like burning spears. The battle had begun. From the window, Rhaenyra watched as two Velarii ships were hit, their shields breaking apart. One of them exploded in a ball of fire, sending debris flying. "Keep fighting," Rhaenyra shouted. Elias turned to her. "We need to hit them hard and fast. If they break our line, it's over." Rhaenyra nodded. "Agreed." She turned to Tolan. "Focus all fire on the Krexar command ship. Take out their leader, and the others might fall back." "Yes, Commander." Outside, the Velarii fleet turned as one, aiming their weapons at a larger Krexar ship that led the others. The command ship was covered in dark armor, and strange symbols glowed on its side. "Fire," Rhaenyra ordered. The Velarii ships fired together, sending a storm of energy beams that hit the Krexar command ship's shields. The shields shimmered red, holding for a moment, but then cracked under the attack. "They are losing their shields," Tolan said with hope. But then, the Krexar fought back. The command ship fired a huge red beam that hit one of Rhaenyra's ships, cutting it in half. "Evasive action," Rhaenyra shouted. "Don't let them focus on one ship." Elias grabbed the side of the console as the ship shook from a near hit. "We need to get closer to that command ship. If we don't take it out, they'll destroy us all. Rhaenyra nodded. Then let's get closer. She turned to the pilot. Take us in. Full speed. The pilot looked surprised but obeyed. The ship raced forward, flying straight toward the Krexar command ship. Ready torpedoes, Rhaenyra said. Tolan looked at her, wide-eyed. Commander, if we get hit. We won't, Rhaenyra said firmly. As they sped toward the enemy ship, other Velaryon ships followed, covering them by firing at the Krexar fighters. We're in range, Tolan shouted. Fire all torpedoes, Rhaenyra commanded. With a loud whoosh, 4 glowing torpedoes shot out, speeding toward the Krexar command ship. Everyone watched as the torpedoes hit the enemy ship's weak shields. There was a moment of silence, and then a massive explosion shook space. The Krexar command ship burst apart, sending fire and debris in every direction. Cheers erupted on Rhaenyra's ship. They're pulling back, Tolan said with surprise. The Krexar ships are retreating. Rhaenyra let out a deep breath. We did it. But Ilias stood quietly, watching the Krexar ships as they disappeared into the darkness. They'll be back, he said quietly. This was just the first attack. Rhaenyra looked at him. I know. But now, the council will believe us. They have to. Ilias gave a small nod. Let's hope they start preparing. Because next time, the Krexar will come stronger. Rhaenyra walked to the window, looking out at the stars. For now, they had won. But she knew the real war was only beginning. The stars above Velara Prime shined quietly, as if hiding the truth that war had begun. The city below was busy like never before. Ships flew in every direction. Soldiers marched through the streets. People whispered in markets, fear on their faces. Inside the high chamber, Commander Rhaenyra and Captain Ilias Ward stood before the council. This time, the council members looked serious, not proud or angry. They had seen the Krexar with their own eyes, and they knew now what was coming. Commander Rhaenyra, Chancellor Velkur said, his voice softer than before, we have received reports from all our outposts. The Krexar are attacking everywhere. Rhaenyra nodded. Yes, Chancellor, they won't stop until everything is gone. Velkur looked at Ilias, and for the first time, there was no hate in his eyes. And you, Captain Ward, you fought beside us. You saved many of our ships. We owe you thanks. Ilias gave a small nod. Thank me later. Right now, we have to survive. An older council member, Elder Saren, stood. The question is, how? Our fleets are strong, but the Krexar are stronger, and they are many. For a moment, the room was quiet. Everyone knew Saren was right. Then Ilias stepped forward. We need to fight together, humans and Velaryon. If we fight alone, we lose. If we fight together, maybe we win. Velkur raised an eyebrow. You ask us to trust humans. I do, Ilias said firmly, because we are stronger than you think. We have ships. We have weapons. And now we have a common enemy. The council members whispered among themselves. Rhaenyra looked around and said, Chancellor, I have fought beside Captain Ward. He risked his life for my people. I believe him. And if we don't unite now, we all fall. Finally, Elder Saren spoke again. Perhaps it is time we stop holding on to old anger. The Krexar will not care if we are human or Velaryon. They will destroy us all. Velkur looked at Rhaenyra, then Ilias. He let out a deep breath. Very well. We will speak with the human leaders. We will prepare for war. Together. A quiet cheer rose in the chamber. A new hope was born. Outside, as Rhaenyra and Ilias walked along a balcony, they watched the sun setting over Velara Prime. So it begins, Ilias said quietly. Yes, Rhaenyra replied. But at least we are not alone anymore. Ilias looked out at the sky. Back on Earth, people never believed we could work with aliens. They thought we would always fight. But now, Rhaenyra smiled. Now we have no choice but to be friends. They stood quietly for a moment, watching the sky turn orange and gold. Suddenly, Tolan ran up to them. "Commander, Captain, you need to see this." He held out a datapad. A message from human leaders was on the screen. "We have received your message. Human fleets are on the way. We will fight beside Velarii. Together, we will stop the Krexar." Elias smiled. "They're coming." Rhaenyra nodded. "Good, because we'll need every ship." Days passed quickly. Velarii and human engineers worked side by side. Ships were repaired and armed with new weapons. Soldiers trained together, learning to fight as one army. Elias walked through the shipyard, watching Velarii ships being upgraded with human technology. "This will help," he said to himself. Rhaenyra joined him. "It's strange, isn't it, seeing humans and Velarii working together?" "But it feels right," Elias said. She nodded. "Yes, it does." Finally, the day came. The combined human and Velarii fleet gathered in space. Hundreds of ships, big and small, filled the sky. In the command ship, Rhaenyra stood at the front, wearing her silver uniform. Elias stood beside her, in dark blue armor. Tolan reported from his station. "Commander, all ships ready." Rhaenyra looked at Elias. "Are you ready, Captain?" He smiled. "Let's do this." She turned to the crew. "Open the channel." A soft beep, and now every ship could hear her voice. "This is Commander Rhaenyra. Today, we face a great danger. The Krexar want to destroy all we love, but we will not let them. Today, Velarii and humans fight together, as one. Together, we are strong. Together, we will win." The crews across the fleet cheered. Elias stepped forward. "This is Captain Ward. Remember, we are not just fighting for today. We are fighting for tomorrow. For our families. For our worlds. Let's show the Krexar what happens when enemies become allies." More cheers filled the ships. Rhaenyra turned to the pilot. "Set course for the Krexar invasion fleet." "Yes, Commander." The ship turned, and soon the entire fleet followed, flying toward the stars. As they flew, Elias looked at Rhaenyra. No turning back now. She smiled. "Good, because I wouldn't want to fight beside anyone else." Elias smiled too. "Then let's go win a war." The stars shone above them, and far ahead, the shadow of the Krexar fleet waited. But now, human and Velarii ships flew side by side, ready to fight for a future they would share. Together, they were hope. Together, they were strong. And together, they would fight for life itself.